Good morning, Weymouth High School, APES, AP Environmental Science. I'm away from you right now because I'm at Holly Hill Farm in Cohasset. I'm also 6 feet away from a wonderful videographer, Janice, who you'll get a chance to learn from a little bit later on. So I have my mask ready, practicing safe guidelines in light of the fact that there is a pandemic. And we do wish that the pandemic were not here and that you were here at the farm. You Weymouth High School students would love a field trip here to see what we're doing. About 15, 12 miles away from you here in Cohasset, down on the rocky shore where the ocean meets the land. So I'm John Belber. Today in this video, you'll be joined by Janice, as I mentioned, McPhillips, our farm teacher and education outreach coordinator, and Sally Rossi Orman, a wonderful farm teacher here. We've got a few things to share with you. In place of you being here on an annual field trip, we're bringing the farm to you by way of video. So thanks for watching Mr. McEachran's class and Ms. Gosselin's class. We're excited to teach you about organic farming, about responsible stewardship, and about how we are here working with the land in a regenerative practice to take care of the soil and grow some good, healthy food. I want to also just take a moment to acknowledge that we're on this land here. It's been owned by the White family, Gene and Frank White and their family, for 5 generations. And before that, there were many people not owning the land, but living on the land and working with the land and fishing and encamping. Native peoples, indigenous people on this land here many years ago. There aren't that many here right now. They're in different encampments throughout the country, throughout Massachusetts. But I wanted to acknowledge their work and on this land that they used and we are now using to try to maintain a good sense of responsibility and stewardship. So enjoy the field trip. We're delighted to have you here and look forward to speaking with you about organic farming and sustainable practices as the day goes on.
Hi, I'm Sally Rossi Orman. I'm one of the farm educators here on the lovely Holly Hill Farm here in Cohasset. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about soil. We all need to eat. We all need to have food in our lives. And where do we get food from is basically from growing it. Some of us might also forage for it, but most of us either go to the supermarket and buy food. We don't know really a lot of times where it's actually been flown in from, or we grow our own food. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the soil, which is the essence of where most of our food on this planet comes from. When we talk about soil, we're talking about a mixture of ingredients, organic and inorganic materials. Inorganic materials being the rock and silt and the sand that composes our soil. Organic materials are the root structures and fibers of old trees and materials that have grown in the soil, as well as dead animals and their feces and all the organisms that live in good, healthy soil to bring a balance to the soil so that it can actually grow. Any of you who have gardened, you may be aware that most of our food needs to be grown in a soil that's roughly between a pH of 6 and 7. And it's a very fine balance. And that pH is actually dependent on the rocks that the soil came from. If we were growing food in a place that was dominated by limestone, our soil would have a different pH than the pH that we have here in the soil on Holly Hill Farm. Holly Hill Farm is actually built on ancient granite that is roughly about 380 million years old. And so that's the start of our soil here, is from the bedrock. But what's unique about this area and a lot of New England is that a lot of our soil is not just made from the bedrock, but is actually made by glaciation, or glaciers that came down during the last ice age that scoured the earth as they moved 1 inch a year slowly towards the ocean and down south towards as far south is our Martha's Vineyard area. And when they were moving and scouring the soil, they were also breaking up pieces of that bedrock, as well as bringing in other rocks, those erratic rocks as we call it when we talk about glaciation, the rocks that were brought from as far north as Canada, all the way down, being pushed and ground down into smaller rocks and sand. So New England is unique in this area in particular, is that where we get our pH from and where we get our soil from, the beginnings of it, is mainly due for glaciation. And the fact that we have so much sand here, right? So that's all the beaches and the coastal sands and such. So we have to build our soil up on what was left. Now, if you think about 12,000 years ago, those glaciers are moving and acting like a plow. And they're plowing up anything that was there before. So the trees, the plant, the fauna, all that are gone now. And what we're left at 12,000 years later is basically bare rock. So how does bare rock become soil? If soil is this mixture of sand, silt, clay, and organic and inorganic materials, how does it build? Well, it takes a long time to build soil, real soil, good combination of soil. And in the last 12,000 years, we have probably built soil, nature has built soil here, that's only really about 8 inches thick. The estimate of most land in the world, it takes about 500 years to make 1 inch of soil. Think about that. 500 years to make 1 inch of arable or growing on soil. And so if you think about it, the absolute most around here, we have maybe 20 inches of soil. And that would be really lucky. Most of the time when you dig in New England, you're going to hit a rock. So it's taken a long time to build up the soil that we do have here. Not the greatest place to grow food, I've got to tell you. It's rocky, it's cold, we've got ocean breezes and salt air, which is not really good for our planets. So Holly Hill Farm, we need to amend or help our soil grow and stay healthy. And so our philosophy is not to take from the soil. Every time we pull a root out of the ground, a carrot out of the ground, there's a little soil that's still attached to that. That soil needs to be put back into the ground here and not washed down a sink someplace. So we're talking about regenerative, we're talking about sustainable farming here, and it's really about keeping that balance in our soil and keeping it healthy. Now, one of the reasons why it's so critical for us to take care of our soil here is we're having less and less in the world to be able to grow our food on. In the 1960s, there was about 1 acre of land per person in the world to be able to grow food. So if you were one person and you wanted to grow all the food you wanted to eat for a year, here's your 1 acre of land. Well, now it's less than a half an acre per person, and that's less than 100 years later. So we have to watch where this soil is going and how we can preserve it through our practices here. So in order to do a good job with it and adding to the soil and keeping it, we have to be very aware of what we're bringing into the farm, what we're adding to our soil, and what we're taking away from it. In the U.S. alone, there's only about 16% of the land in the United States that could be used for growing. And this growing is not just for food for humans, but also for the animals that we raise in this country. So that's not a whole lot of land left to feed the masses. And in this world, we're approaching 8 billion people? So we have to figure out how are we going to feed all these people? How are we going to protect the earth and its soil so that we don't use it up? We have learned some lessons we've yet to learn in our major agricultural society here in the United States, where there's big farms. We're losing about 1 million acres a year of farmable land, basically due to development. In my own family, in my sister-in-law's family, they used to have a huge farm in Kansas that raised cattle and such. Well, it's actually more profitable for them now to have solar farms. So the farmers are selling out their land, not for more cattle or not for growing food, but to put the solar panels in place and the wind turbines and such. So we're losing our space to grow in this country by about 1 million acres a year. That's a lot. I wanted to talk about the 5 factors that make soil. One of the first factors is the parent rock that I talked about, whether it's granite, or whether it's limestone or wherever, or it's been brought in by glaciation. Second thing to make soil is the vegetation, the decomposing and the living. But living vegetation also brings in different organisms, microorganisms into the soil and creates a life. Soil is alive. It's the most live thing on this planet, to tell you the truth. Climate affects our soil. How? Well, it controls the physical part of our, climate change, bringing in water, erosions, it's changing the heat is starting to break down materials faster, and also the chemical changes that happen during climate change, the acid rains and that sort of thing that start to break down rocks faster or create a different pH in the soils. The topography of the land also affects soil, right? So try to grow a garden on the base of a mountain. You might grow for 1 or 2 years, and then here comes the avalanche, and then it wipes out all your soil and stuff. So topography controls the stability of the land, right? So we're not growing food on tops of mountains. We have to do some kind of an open field so we get sunshine and that sort of thing. So the topography of where the soil is very important as well. And the last thing that creates soil is time. And like I said, it takes 500 to almost 2,000 years in some places to grow 1 inch of soil. So it's very important to keep and maintain and increase the amount of soil. Now, we can't really make soil. I know that sounds weird, but we can't simply go to a rock, break it all down, mix it with a little of this, mix it with a little of that, and hopefully that turns into soil. It's really a unique mixture. And all the stuff that we have on this planet is all the stuff we're ever going to have. More soil is not coming from the sky. So we can transplant, we can move soil from one space to the next, but then you leave with bare spots. So in order for us to kind of demonstrate about how necessary it is to preserve and to improve our farming practices here in this world, and also to give back to our land, I want to give you a little short and sweet demonstration about what kind of soil and how much soil we actually have on this planet to feed right now 8 billion people and soon to be 9 billion at the end of the century. Take a little demonstration here. So here's an apple. So if this apple is representing the earth, I'm going to ask you a question. How much of the earth is covered in water and also has water in it? Most of us learned back in elementary school that the apple that represents the earth is composed primarily, or 3/4 of our planet is covered in water. So I'm taking this apple and I'm cutting it in fourths. I'm going to say, so this apple here is representing all the water that we have on Earth, which just leaves us 1/4 of the apple, which is land. Cool. So here's all the land represented that we have on the Earth. But we know that we can't plant on the entire Earth, right? So we're going to take this and cut this in half. So 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. Okay. And so here's all the land that we have on Earth. But we find out that about half of that land that's on Earth we can't garden, we can't farm on. Because what? What is half the Earth covered with? We have mountains, tops, and deserts, and polar ice. Right? So half of the quarter we can't plant on because of these structures in our Earth. Now, the other remaining piece we're going to cut into actually fourths, representing these pieces here represent, now we can't farm on this because of mountains, and we can't farm on this because the land is covered. The land is covered by roads and buildings and airports and houses and structures, man-made structures. So we can't grow on those structures. And included in this is also the land that we've destroyed. So we've had radiation fallouts, right? We have fracking that destroys the soil and the water. We have oil spills that have destroyed the land. So there's a lot of poor land management as well. Land management meaning they didn't do it right the first time. Like an example of that would be in our bread basket in the 1930s, where the soil used to be 2 to 3 feet deep. And because they didn't follow great land practices, it blew away during horrendous times of drought. It was a time period called the Dust Bowl. And literally people had to live year after year with less and less crops, less and less water, until finally it collapsed. And great droves of people moved away from that area because they couldn't sustain themselves anymore. My mother was one of those people. She was one of the people she grew up in Kansas and she moved out to California during the 1930s with her family. So kind of strikes home for me. So what we're left with all the water that we can't grow on, the quarter of the land that's left is divvied into mountaintops and deserts that we can't grow on. We can't grow on where we have our buildings and our such and where we've polluted. So that leaves about 1/32 of the land left out of this entire apple. And yet we don't grow on this whole piece, right? We only grow roughly about 8 to 12 to at most 20 inches deep in the soil. So what really gets represented is the top surface of our earth, or the soil layer. Is really all that's left. This thin little strap is all that's left to feed our billions of people on this planet. And once it's gone, it's gone. Once it's irradiated or polluted to the point where you can't be growing on it for thousands or millions of years. So that's why it's so important. This little sliver of skin left to feed the entire continent, and to hopefully, be not only to grow, but also to grow healthy food, because there's a difference between just growing food and growing food that's actually going to sustain the human body. So I wanted you to be able to see this and kind of get a feel for why it's important for Holly Hill Farm, as well as other farmers in this world, to start to think about really giving back to the earth, to regenerate it, to improve it, and to bless it, because that's what's feeding us. And hopefully you'll kind of walk away and tread a little lighter on the soil, realizing that that's what's sustaining our earth. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you on the farm soon, with or without masks. Have a great day.
Okay, so with our dire predictions about our losing and lost soil, I wanted to come in here and say there are things that we can do. Weymouth High School, there are steps that we can take to help. I've come into the greenhouse. This beautiful, warm greenhouse is now heated by propane. The propane warms up this space, and the farmers can start their seeds and seedlings in springtime. Actually, late February, they will start to put all their seeds into soil. What can we do to help with that? We can learn by sowing our own seeds. There's an old greenhouse at the high school, and maybe we get in there in this spring and start to put some seeds into the soil. I use that word sow, S-O-W, and you place a seed into the soil. There are lots of seed catalogs available so that we could order some seeds. Tomatoes, do you like? Cucumbers, squash, eggplant, zucchini. What seeds do you want to grow? What plants can we grow? Maybe at Weymouth High School. Last year I was able to work with one high schooler in Weymouth, and I'd love to get some more out to help me to grow some food and sell it at the Weymouth Farmers Market. Some high schoolers get involved in working for the rec department and other jobs and other activities during the summer. I would love some help with Weymouth high schoolers at the Weymouth Farmers Market. We could grow and build some beds at the high school. This brown bag that Sally used to bring her apples, I'm going to save that for market so that someone who is shopping can be able to use a brown bag to take home their produce. Let's look at the beginning part of the seed sowing operation. Look what I saved here. A nice bean pod. Is it Uncle Willie, Janice?
It is.
Uncle Willie's beans. That's the variety name of these wonderful beans, and you can see I've saved a few in this pod. I've got a few more pods here. Janice has a great recipe for a white bean hummus, I believe, with these Uncle Willie's beans. They're kind of pretty with their speckled. I could order these online. I could also save them. It's a wonderful tradition and a great activity to know about the source of your seeds if you're able to grow them and save them. You have more reliability. You know where they grew, how they grew. Seed saving could be a great start to how we plant and how we grow. So I've got some bean seeds right there. I wanted to share with you also this little cob of a glass gem corn. Peeling back the husks, you see all these little kernels being protected here. And this is a corn that you could use for popping. Have you ever had popcorn, boys and girls? So this is wonderful to break apart, and you could certainly take those to your kitchen and have a nice little organic healthy snack of popcorn. And we could also save them. Each one of these seeds, we hope, will grow into a new corn plant. So they make a lot of cobs off of one stalk, and that each cob has so many different seeds. Look at that wonderful patterning of all those seeds lined up together right there. I also have some sunflower seed heads right there. So inside are teeny tiny seeds from the flower head. After the flower has been pollinated by a honeybee, we've got some seeds to save to grow some sunflowers. And one other seed is a preview. It's not a true seed, but this garlic right here. I'm going to use this garlic later on during our field trip. But this is something that we could plant at the high school. You actually take the individual clove and you plant it in the fall. Mr. McKecker and I did this once on the hill years ago at Weymouth High School. And each garlic will form into a new bulbs of garlic with stem, stalk, and roots down below. Saving seeds. I've got lots of seeds saved for Weymouth High School. We could start growing at the high school. You could start growing at home. And certainly the farmers, through the seeds they save and the seeds they order, that's the beginning part. That's where they get everything started to grow happily and healthfully here at the farm. Okay, on we go.
Okay, Weymouth environmental science students, my name is Janice McPhillips, and we are here at the compost area of the farm. Sally's going to pan around. You can see a bunch of piles of finished compost, and we're going to learn about the process of making compost and how we do it here at Holly Hill Farm. So as Sally and Johnny both have said, we grow vegetables here, mostly vegetables. We also grow flowers and herbs. But really, as a regenerative, sustainable, certified organic farm, I like to tell people that one of the most important things we're doing here is we are growing soil, okay? And as Sally said, it takes hundreds of years to grow an inch of soil. And how does soil grow? Well, the microbes that are in the soil break things down as they die. The roots of plants that are dead get broken down. Dead animals, like Sally said, manures from animals, squirrels that may run onto the fields, birds that defecate on the fields, all of that stuff gets broken down by microbes that are living in the soil, and slowly over time, combined with parent material, rocks and whatnot that are in the soil gets built up. So one of the most important things that we do here at Holly Hill Farm is we make compost. We have a very small scale food waste composting pickup program, and we're going to show you over here how that works. So here Johnny has buckets of food waste that he has picked up from, I think it's 9 different restaurants and cafes around the South Shore. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and you want to ask that question, not of guilt or shame, but does Weymouth High School make compost? I know you're still hybrid, those of you students who are in school, so there's an opportunity to have a lunch or go to that culinary Weymouth Cafe that you have there and do some eating. There's bound to be some leftover parts of food scraps that could be diverted from the trash. So we collect about 40 buckets a week from different residents and businesses, and schools can certainly do it too. Eggshell, leaf of an old strawberry plant, banana peel, even a paper towel in here will biodegrade. The bleached white ones take longer than the brown ones do. So we're about ready to finish off this recipe we're following. The recipe allows for 8 wheelbarrow units of nitrogen material. That's straight manure from our donkey and our pony, and food scraps and coffee grounds that I said that we pick up. Some stuff is made here on the farm, obviously, when those animals cooperate, and others is just what we collect. So this is the last of the 8 wheelbarrow units of food scraps. That's nitrogen. We need 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. So the 3 parts carbon are 1.5 wheelbarrows of wood chips. We had some wood chips donated to us by local tree companies, clearing and felling trees, and they have wood chips that is a great source of carbon. That's 1.5 of carbon. Half of the shavings from pumpkin stall. That will make 2 carbon to our 1 nitrogen. And the third source of carbon is a wheelbarrow full of packed down leaves. Again, the landscape companies, and there are landscape companies in Weymouth that could do this too. These leaves, another good source of carbon, into the mix. So there we go. 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. I will record that in our log so we can tell the Bay State certifiers that if our pile heats up, we followed the rules and wrote down the ingredients and the ratios. 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. The next and most important thing as we begin to make compost is the mixing. We're going to talk about how these piles and living compost, right, Janice, needs air. It's a living thing. So to get air into that pile, I then turn and mix. And for those of you on the Weymouth dance team or the Weymouth football team who are looking for some exercise, this is a great way to stay fit and to mix our ingredients so they can begin to break down, and that incredible chemical reaction can happen with the 3 parts carbon to the 1 part nitrogen. From here, from the mixing stage, following the recipe, we put this with the tractor or by hand onto our static aerated piles. Janice, do we have some heat? Do we have some things cooking over here?
All right, before we talk about heat, I want to back up a step and I want to share something with you. This is a beautiful infographic that hopefully Sally is going to get on the screen. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. This was made by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. This is the recipe that Johnny was talking about. 3 parts by volume of material that's rich in carbon and to 1 part by volume of material that's rich in nitrogen. Now just a word about carbon and nitrogen. And there's examples on here of what are carbon rich and what are nitrogen. So you can get this off the Mass DEP website. I'll include the link so that you can go look at that, so you can do it at home, so you can do it at school, and you can understand why carbon and nitrogen are important. Now, just like in our diets, a carbon source, carbohydrates, that word carbon, carbohydrates, right? So we all need carbs for energy. And nitrogen, maybe you know this from taking a biology class, nitrogen is the building blocks of proteins. Well, guess what? The work of decomposition is done by many billions and billions of unseen microbes. Here is a nice also diagram that you can find on the Mass Department of Environmental Protection website, which is the food web of the compost pile. Basically all of the decomposers unseen with a naked human eye, you can see them with a microscope, and the things that are bigger that you can see with your eye, like worms and millipedes and pill bugs and spiders and ants, things that can chop food physically. Worms don't have teeth, they can't chop. Basically what they're doing in a compost pile is eating the microbes that are doing the job of breaking down the food. Now the reason for that 3-to-1 ratio that's very carefully explained in here, just like your body needs the proper nutrients in terms of carbohydrates, sugars, and proteins, which have nitrogen, and it wouldn't be good to eat an all-carb diet or an all-nitrogen diet. So microbes need a balanced diet too. And that 3-to-1 ratio gives the microbes that live in the compost pile just the right nutrition so that they can do the job of taking those whole things that you saw. There were oranges and apples, horse manure, leaves, wood chips. All of that stuff is going to get broken down and decomposed, okay? Another important thing to know, I'm sure at some point in high school and when you were younger, you learned about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process where the sun shines on leaves. Leaves take in the sun, they take the carbon dioxide, and what do? They manufacture sugar, right? They make the sugar in the plant, they make sap, they make sugar that they exude into the roots of plants. And all of that sugar not only makes food for us to eat, so for example, when you are eating a zucchini, you might not think of zucchini as having sugar in it, but it does. You certainly know that there's sugar in an apple when you eat an apple, and you know that there's sugar in maple syrup when you eat maple syrup. But there's sugar in all parts of the plant that we eat that's made from carbon. So when the tree is done, like that apple that Sally cut up, when the tree is done living, when the leaves are done living for the season and they fall on the ground, or the apple that Sally cuts up, you don't eat the core usually, and you don't eat the seeds, but there's actually nutrition in that apple that we're not going to eat. That goes into the compost pile and it decomposes, which is the reverse of photosynthesis. It's the sugar from the apple plus the air that Johnny just showed you by mixing and stirring that gets the microbes that are living in a compost pile, turning all of that sugar into carbon dioxide, volatilizes off, and heat. So speaking of heat, that's what Johnny was asking. Do we have heat in our compost pile? Well, let's take a walk over to one of these compost piles and you'll see I stuck a thermometer in here a little while ago. Now it's cold. We're filming this on Sunday and the temperature is about 30. But look at that. Inside that compost pile is about 121 maybe degrees. That's pretty hot. So it's not in the sun. The heat of the compost pile doesn't come from the sun. We are in the shade here. The heat comes from the microbes metabolizing the sugar in all of that material and giving off heat. And we are required, according to Bay State certifiers, to show that our compost has heated up to a temperature that will kill any pathogenic bacteria that's in the horse manure or other places. There are bacteria everywhere in the world. Some of them are good for you, some of them are bad. We know that there's a pandemic going on right now. That's a virus, not a bacteria. But thank goodness there are certain bacteria in the world, because those bacteria do the job of decomposing things and turning them into something useful. So let's talk about the something useful. Pan around over here, Sally, if you would.
Okay.
And that temperature is 131 degrees for 3 days. So we record that. If it heats up, we record that temperature of 131 degrees or above.
Right. So we make compost every week, and Johnny mixes and puts compost onto these aeration pipes. If you can see this black pipe, there is a 4-inch diameter pipe that runs the entire depth of this composting area. And behind the concrete block over there is a little tiny fan. The fan is powered by batteries that are charged by a solar panel. So we have an entirely sustainable system here. What happens is the air gets pushed through the pipe, up through the pile, and basically helps give those microbes that are living in this pile the air that they need to decompose all of this material. So we don't have to stir this pile. It's just a different kind of a composting system called an aerated static pile. Static meaning it stays still. And the finished product is over here. We have many different piles. They're all numbered because we keep records on which piles are which, so we know how old they are and when we can use them. And this is the finished product. Here we have some beautiful certified organic compost. The pile's a little bit frozen because it's cold out here, but you can see all the raw material that was in the pile has decomposed. You don't see any more visible apples, pumpkins, bananas, avocados. All the food has been decomposed by the microbes. They say that in a teaspoon of soil, and certainly in a teaspoon of compost, there are billions and billions of microbes. Those microbes in that compost, if we put them in the field, they will establish a microbial community in the soil that does great things for soil. You might have heard about this phrase, carbon sequestration. Here's what's going on when microbes in soil are sequestering carbon. They basically are taking carbon from the atmosphere, comes into the plant, right? Plants take in carbon dioxide, turn it into sugar. Some of it becomes sugar for the plant. That's the stuff we eat. The plant also pumps sugar into the roots under the ground to feed the microbes that are around the roots of the soil, the roots of the plant. It's a great system that nature has figured out, what you call a symbiotic relationship between the plant and the microbial community in the soil. So the more microbes we put in the soil in the form of compost or in the form of mulching the soil with leaves to create some decomposition going on there that's happening in place, or adding compost like I said, what happens is those microbes take the sugars from the roots of the plants that are exuded into the soil and they turn that into long-chain carbon molecules known as humus, organic matter. There's some thought that maybe plants could take so much carbon out of the air and sequester it as carbon molecules in the soil, humus, also another substance called glomalin, that it could actually take carbon out of the air and help address this climate change problem we've got going on here. Too much carbon in the atmosphere. So it's another reason why adding compost to soil in a garden, a farm, under grass is a great thing for the environment. This is a compost bin called an earth machine. This is an example of a bin that you, Weymouth High School, could apply for from the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. They make these available to schools for free as a way of encouraging schools to compost. So this is called an earth machine. There's another bin that many schools have that's called a New Age composter. These are made locally in New Bedford out of recycled milk bottles. So you're supporting a local business making a product out of a recycled material. These are also available free to schools from the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. You can apply through the Green Team. thegreenteam.org is the way you apply. And you could take your food scraps from lunch and turn them into compost right on campus there at Weymouth High School. Wouldn't that be great?
Okay, Weymouth High School. We're now moved out to the field. This is where we can think about the soil that Sally was talking about and think about how we use our compost that we've made here that Janice talked about. Here in the growing field, one of our largest growing fields on the farm, little less than an acre, you'll see lots and lots of outdoor growing beds, long rows marked by strings so the farmers know where to do their plants and their plantings. In a few minutes, we're going to visit the greenhouses that we've put on top of these field beds. But out here, this is where, come springtime, we'll be ready to do some more planting. Varieties, lots of varieties of vegetables the farmers grow here organically. We grow beets and carrots, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, lots and lots of flowers, cut flowers for beauty and for the honeybees. There's a great variety here. These farmers are trying to make produce and flowers and herbs available year-round. On Thursdays, you can even shop at store.hollyhillfarm.org so you can purchase some of this locally grown vegetables and items for a pickup right now online, pickup in person on Saturdays. But right now, let's look at the fields right here. Different rows and beds, a slight downhill. We don't want to lose that soil, that precious soil that Sally talked about. We don't want to lose that and have it go out into the historic marsh or wash away. We want to hold onto that soil and protect it. So sometimes you can leave a tomato plant or an eggplant in the ground. Those roots are going to hold that soil over the course of the winter. Another way to protect the soil and to keep it here is to add a layer, this nice big layer of leaves right here. Local landscaper brought us a whole bunch of leaves. They're happy not to have to pay to dump them. We'll take them, we'll put them right onto that soil, almost like a blankie, a little blanket, I tell the first graders. But that's holding onto that soil. It's also making sure that when springtime comes, when things begin to wake up, we want to protect that and keep that in here. We're not going to bring the tractor in and till up the soil. Tractors are lovely, they are iconic, they remind us of farming. Now, many organic farmers across the country and internationally are using a no-till method, keeping that carbon in the soil so the plants can access it when they need it, not releasing that into the environment. We want to hold that carbon in there. Sequester it is a phrase that Janice mentioned that we are thinking about. Keep it right in there. Plus, we are regenerating the soil by adding this rich microbial life right here. Come springtime, if this is going to be a row of tomatoes, and the farmers are in their office right now thinking out where the crops are going to go based on the rotation, based on what plants need in their new beds. So right here, come springtime, let's say tomatoes, a good, hardy, reliable New England crop. We're just going to move those leaves aside, stick that seedling, start it in the greenhouse, right into the ground. No need to bring a tractor in. No need to upset the soil that's in there. These beds have soil that's protected and beds that are ready come springtime. It keeps them warm, keeps them ready, and we're going to be excited to grow in these outdoor growing beds. Just like I'd like to do some growing at the high school with 12 garden beds. And we can maybe grow some food for the farmers market. So more on that later, but high schoolers, I'd love to have your help in growing some local food right at Weymouth High School. Okay, APES, AP Environmental Science. These are the greenhouses. Not only is this a virtual video field trip, but it is a secret virtual video field trip. We're gonna go inside these greenhouses. Not a big mechanized glass structured greenhouse, basically just a beautiful hoop house. Little venting system to allow airflow back and forth, but protected, and we'll feel it, and I'm gonna try to convey that feeling to you when we step inside, what's happening inside with the growth. Here's a high-tech lock system. Let's go, come on Janice, into the greenhouse to see what's happening. Shh. Lots of greens and plants are sleeping. The farmers have put an extra layer, 2 extra layers of remake cloth. Agribond, it's a fabric that allows light to get through, not so much the rain, and it protects the greens that are in here. So, ooh and ah at this Weymouth High School, as we pull back the curtain to find the wizard. Here are mixed greens. The farmers have already come through and done some cutting, because as I said, we're selling year-round here at this farm. So these greens were put in late October, early November to get established before the hard frosts and cold of winter. To my right, to stage left, to your left, is some spinach, some nice organic spinach. And these are here, and inside this greenhouse, guess what happens when the sun shines in? It gets trapped in here. The doors are closed at night because it's chilly and below freezing, right? Just like you are hopefully safe in the evenings when the cold comes with warmth that you need. We want to make sure these plants are protected too with the warmth that they need. So there are about 5 greenhouses down here serving the same purpose, hosting and allowing plants to keep on growing throughout the winter. These are hardy plants. They're able to handle the up and down rise of the temperatures, right? Right now in here, it's probably over 45, 50 degrees. That's warm for a spinach plant or a mixed brassica braising mix over here of greens and purples. And when the farmers come along for the spinach, they're gonna look for the biggest leaf to hand pick with their knife or just their pinch so that they can have the chance for greens year round. So these will really take off as the light begins to lengthen. So I know that you're up early, Weymouth High, even if you're on Zoom or in the classroom, and the sun is rising a little earlier these days and setting a little bit later on. So that's important for these plants. They respond to that longer days of sunlight. So do we, right? We, those who might have a disorder with the lack of sunshine, we respond and like it when the sun is shining down for a long amount of time. Because these are protected, we've got to make sure they've got good compost in here, which the farmers do add, and we show you how we're making our compost. The farmers have bought in some compost from other compost makers. We're trying to keep the circle very tight here and make our own compost here, get it certified by making sure that temperature rises, and then being able to bring that certified compost sifted right into the garden beds. Now look what's next to the compost and under the leaves. is some black drip tape. That's our irrigation system, where water from a new well is pulled out of the ground and pumped, fed into our hose systems so they can, when necessary, water our plants. Less likely right now. It's pretty moist due to the moisture. There's even moisture on the bottom of the spinach leaf right here, just from the condensation and things in here. So that happens when the greenhouse warms up during the day, right? And then begins to drip down its condensation. You'll see some different, you're seeing condensation right there. You want to add something, Janice?
I don't know if you can see this from the... But there's
Condensation
water.
right inside there, the water droplets. That can only add to our, it's dripping down right now, onto our plants.
So this greenhouse is how long, do you know?
I do not know how long this is. Down to that piece, looks like at least 80 feet.
I think I've heard that
I'm
number
remembering
before.
about 80 feet.
So there are
and then
one,
you'll see some
two...
string attached up here. That's when the tomato plants or cucumber plants are climbing up and they need trellis and support. So Weymouth High School, I've talked for the years with Mr. McEachern about the fact that there's an old greenhouse at the high school, and wouldn't that be great to resurrect and get some plants growing in there. Controlled environment, it takes time. You've got to be in there every day. Right now, this is a more simple way of getting plants established and getting crops to grow. That's my hope. I would love to bring you some salad greens. Weymouth High, we've got to work together on trying to find ways to compost what's around us, reduce our trash, give back to the soil, regenerate the soil around us. If there's a bit of grass that could host a few garden beds for growing one of your favorite vegetables or fruits or herbs, then let's do that. We'll keep growing. I look forward to speaking with you. Thanks for coming to Holly Hill Farm virtually, and maybe you'll come help with the Weymouth Farmers Market this summer, or you'll come do some volunteering right here. We've got a whole garden devoted to growing produce to donate for those in need. Lots of efforts, lots of opportunities. Keep on growing. Thanks, Weymouth High. Talk to you soon.